Imagine getting a check just for having a baby. Seriously, picture that for a second.
Yeah, I mean...
That's not some fantasy, right? It's a real discussion happening right now within the U.S. government, this idea of a $5,000 baby bonus.
And what's really interesting, I think, is the why behind it, the context driving this whole conversation.
That's exactly.
The U.S. birth rate, it's dipped to a historic low. We're talking around 1.6 births per woman in 2023.
1.6. And what's the number we usually look for, like for stability?
Right. So to keep the population stable, you generally need about 2.1 births per woman.
Okay.
So yeah, this decline, it's definitely sparked some serious concerns about, what the future looks like.
Okay, let's unpack that worry a bit. More than just numbers changing, isn't it? What's the actual, the core concern there?
Well, if you connect it to the bigger economic picture, a declining birth rate today means, a smaller workforce tomorrow.
Right, fewer workers.
Exactly. And that can put some real pressure on systems like Social Security, and it impacts overall economic growth.
Yeah.
GDP,
Yeah.
We're even seeing projections, I think PwC did one, suggesting a pretty substantial GDP decline in 26 states between 2050 and 2100, all because of aging population.
Wow. Okay, suddenly that $5,000 check seems, maybe less random than it first sounds.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get down to the specifics then. What exactly is this baby bonus proposal?
Okay, so the core idea, and this is what's being reported across, CBS News, Newsweek, places like that. It's a potential $5,000 payment.
To mothers?
To mothers, yeah, after giving birth. And it's gained some traction. President Trump called it a good idea.
I saw it.
Yeah, and the White House has confirmed it is under consideration, though, no final decision yet.
Right.
Even House Speaker Mike Johnson called it a creative idea. So it's definitely being talked about seriously, at least in some circles.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting for me. Have other countries tried this? Like giving out cash for babies? Has it actually worked anywhere?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or maybe the $5,000 question here.
Yeah.
Looking at the international evidence, it really offers some valuable insights. Take Australia, for example.
Right, Australia.
They introduced a baby bonus way back in 2002. It started lower, I think AUD 3,000, but later went up to AUD 5,000.
Same amount, basically. And
So they did see an initial bump, a little uptick in births right after it came in.
oh, okay, so it did something.
For a bit. But here's the thing. Their birth rate has pretty much continued to decline since then.
Oh!
Yeah, it's even fallen below the U.S. rate now, down to around 1.5 children per woman in 2023.
So the bonus didn't really stick.
Seems not.
Yeah.
The general thinking is, it gave a short-term financial boost, but the research suggests it didn't really tackle those deeper anxieties.
Like what?
The long-term financial worries, career interruptions, just how hard it is to juggle work and family. There seem to be the bigger factors in people's decisions.
Right, so a bit of a flash in the pan, maybe, but no real lasting change.
Pretty much, yeah.
What about other places? Any other countries try this?
Oh, definitely. Hungary took a different approach in 2019. They did this zero-interest loan program.
A loan tied to having kids.
Exactly. Up to 10 million foreign, I think. And they had other family support things, too.
And did that work?
Well, they also saw an initial rise in their fertility rate. It had been really low, like 1.2 back in 2011, and it went up to 1.6 by 2021.
Okay, that sounds more promising.
But more recently, that rate has started to fall again, down to 1.38 in 2024.
Huh. So even with loans and other stuff, it's still tricky.
It really suggests that even more, substantial financial support doesn't necessarily guarantee a long-term turnaround.
Are there lots of countries doing this?
Yeah, the Wikipedia entry on baby bonuses actually lists quite a few: Argentina, Canada, Czech Republic, France, Italy, a bunch more.
Wow.
And they all do it differently. Different amounts, different rules. Some are means tested, some universal.
I saw Singapore mentioned somewhere too. Is their approach different?
Yeah, Singapore's interesting. They have what they call a marriage and parenthood package.
Sounds comprehensive.
It is. It includes a cash gift, sure, but also things like a child development account where the government matches contributions and tax rebates, too.
So it's much broader than just one check.
Exactly. A much more sustained, kind of holistic set of incentives.
Okay, so the evidence on just, handing out cash, it doesn't look great for a long-term fix.
Not particularly compelling, no.
Which brings us neatly to the critics. What are the main arguments against this $5,000 idea here in the U.S.?
Well, the big one, the primary argument, is that a one-time payment. It might help right after the birth, sure, some immediate relief.
Yeah, hospital bills, diapers.
Right. but it's unlikely to make a really significant dent in the overall cost of raising a child.
Which is huge, right?
Astronomical. People throw around numbers like $300,000 to age 18. So $5,000 in that context is, well, it's relatively small.
Yeah, a drop in the bucket, almost.
Kind of. So many critics argue that tackling more fundamental stuff would be way more effective.
Like what kind of stuff?
Things like affordable, accessible childcare, that's a huge one, and mandated paid parental leave.
Which the U.S. doesn't have, federally mandated.
Exactly. We're one of the very few developed nations without it. The argument is that fixing those things would create a much more genuinely supportive environment for family.
Makes sense. It's about the long game.
Right. The idea is that big life decisions, like having kids, they're driven by, long-term confidence and security, not just a one-off cash handout.
That makes a lot of sense. It feels more foundational.
Yeah.
Okay, so beyond the economics and the effectiveness, are there other angles here? Potential motivations behind floating this idea now?
Yeah, there definitely seem to be other layers to think about, politically, for instance.
How so?
Well, you could see it as a way to appeal to voters who care a lot about family issues, maybe draw a contrast with previous administrations.
Right, the messaging.
The rhetoric around these proposals often taps into socially conservative values, this desire to see higher birth rates. Sometimes it's framed as being about national strength or, cultural preservation.
Pronatalist rhetoric, is that the term?
That's the term, yeah. A viewpoint that encourages more births, often for those kinds of nationalistic or cultural reasons. You even see some related ideas floating around.
Like what?
Like suggestions for a national medal of motherhood or prioritizing funding for communities with higher marriage and birth rates. It really underscores a particular vision of family.
And I guess the criticism there would be that vision might not include everyone.
That's a key point critics raise, yeah. That these kinds of proposals can feel like they're focused on a very traditional family model.
Right.
And they might overlook or even exclude non-traditional families, LGBTQ plus parents, There's also this underlying idea at some point, too, that maybe part of the motivation is boosting the American-born population specifically.
As opposed to
relying on immigration to fill workforce gaps in the future.
Interesting. Okay. Another huge factor has got to be the cost. Just the raw numbers. $5,000 per baby. How many babies are born each year?
Roughly 3.6 million births in the U.S. annually, give or take.
So, do the math.
Yeah, you're looking at somewhere in the range of $15 billion to $18 billion per year.
$15 to $18 billion. Why?
Yeah.
It's a substantial financial commitment. And, it naturally raises questions about funding, especially when there's also talk about reducing federal spending.
Right. Those things seem kind of opposed.
They could definitely be in tension, yeah.
Okay, so if a simple cash bonus probably isn't the magic bullet and it costs a fortune, what are some of the alternatives? What do countries with more stable birth rates do? Well, as we kind of touched on earlier, the places that tend to have more stable fertility rates, think France, some of the Nordic countries, they often have these really comprehensive systems.
More like Singapore's package idea.
Yeah, but often even broader. They usually combine some direct financial support, sure, but crucially, they pair it with readily available, affordable, high-quality childcare.
Okay, childcare is key.
And generous paid parental leave policies. For both parents, importantly.
Right, not just moms.
Exactly. And just generally, a greater degree of gender equality, both at work and at home. It's about creating this whole environment, this ecosystem.
Where having kids feels more manageable.
Yeah, more financially feasible, and where the burden isn't disproportionately on one parent, usually the mother, it's more holistic.
Okay, so we've really dug into this proposed baby bonus. We've looked at the why, the what happened elsewhere, the criticisms, the potential other factors, the cost, and some alternatives. Let's try and boil this down. What's the key takeaway for you listening to this deep dive?
I think the main takeaway really is that while this idea of a $5,000 check might sound, simple and appealing, a straightforward fix for falling birth rates.
Yeah, it sounds good on paper.
It does. But the evidence, particularly from other countries, it strongly suggests it's just unlikely to be an effective long-term solution.
Right.
These are really complex issues, demographic shifts, societal changes. They seem to need more comprehensive, more sustained, more multifaceted solutions than just a one-time cash payment.
Right. So circling all the way back to where we started, is this the magical answer to reverse the declining birth rate?
It really seems unlikely.
Based on everything we've looked at in this deep dive, yeah, the answer seems to be probably no. the factors influencing birth rates are just way more complicated than just a single financial transaction, aren't they?
Absolutely. You've got the huge economic realities people face. You've got evolving cultural values about family and careers. And then there are these political motivations potentially layered on top. It's all intertwined.
Exactly. Which leads us, I think, to a final thought for you to mull over.
Yeah, if that $5,000 bonus isn't the answer, what combination of things, policies, societal shifts, maybe what could actually create a more genuinely supportive environment? One where people feel confident and secure enough to start or grow their families sustainably.
Right. Maybe the real answers are in those boring basics we talked about.
Could be. Things like real economic security, access to affordable childcare, actual gender equality in all parts of life. Maybe those matter more in the long run than the immediate excitement of a cash bonus.
Something to think about. What truly moves the needle?
So with that in mind, we want to say thank you for being with us.
Yes, thank you so much for tuning in.
We always value your presence and your interest in these topics.
And we're already looking forward to our next conversation.
We'll be sure to delve into even more interesting areas.
Until then, take care.
And we'll catch you on the next one.